Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Success Summit. It is a pleasure to have everyone here today. Out of all the social networks on the web, LinkedIn is by far the most underrated platform available. While it's not uncommon to hear people refer to it as your online resume that you solely use to get jobs, business owners who see beyond this narrow description are using LinkedIn to increase their traffic, subscribers, and sales. Now you will learn how to utilize LinkedIn to fuel your very own content empire. For this session, I am bringing in Daniel Alfon to discuss how we can utilize LinkedIn to fuel our content empires. Daniel is an expert at driving leads with the advanced use of rich media and LinkedIn profiles, and his expertise has attracted the attention of many marketers and companies who eventually become his clients. The LinkedIn expert specializes in increasing visibility, educating an audience about your product or service, and boosting sales for that product or service. With that said, it's time for less talking and more action. Daniel, it is a pleasure to have you on CMSS.
Hey, Mark, I'm very pleased to be here. I'm blushing. The CMS is great, and I look forward to helping you.
Thank you, Daniel. It's really great to have you on the summit. And the way I like to start all of my interviews is I like to call this the why question. It's something I've asked everyone at this point. So for you, what first attracted you to LinkedIn?
Truth to be told, it was probably curiosity. We're talking early 2004. And I believe that you, Mark, at early 2004, were a pretty young entrepreneur. And I got an invitation from someone, and even the idea of social media and social networking was something that people could not really express or understand. And I just wanted to play with it, like many online tools were getting invites to, and this one was interesting from the start. But I could not imagine the strength of LinkedIn and the sheer speed it would, the size of the network, the way you can leverage to LinkedIn to grow your business and get more leads and get more sales. This journey has been amazing.
I really love the sounds of an amazing journey. We're definitely going to tackle later on how you've been able to use LinkedIn and measure all of its power and achieve that power. But before we do that, the most important thing on LinkedIn, arguably, is the profile, because the profile is basically what people get an idea of when they first come to your when they first view you on LinkedIn. It's based on your profile. So how exactly do we polish our LinkedIn profiles?
You're absolutely right. Profiles are the basic stone and the basic pillar we need to take into account. And a lot of business owners, authors, bloggers, and podcasters do not write their profiles thinking about their customers. So we can dive into 3 or 4 quick suggestions, but the single most suggestion I would have is really not a technicality within LinkedIn, but it's our state of mind. Even business owners and consultants think that LinkedIn, like you rightly said, is to get jobs. Now, if we're not looking for a job, but we want leads, then we need to think about LinkedIn differently. And this is the single most difficult thing for entrepreneurs to really understand. Their professional experience is less interesting than what they can provide to their clientele, to their audience. Once you get past that, then we can elaborate on a number of profile elements. The text, be it on your professional experience, or the summary, text from your website, text that you feel comfortable with, is often missing from entrepreneurs' LinkedIn profiles. The next step would be a recommendation to really review what I call the digital portfolio inventory. Google yourself and see the sort of media and documents and files and videos that you can use and those that are relevant to your audience. And after you run that DPI, you select 5 to 10 links and you distribute them smartly throughout your profile. Remembering that the top section of your profile is what people will see first, And if that's not interesting, then they would not go on. They would not engage, would not go to your website, they would not sign up for a newsletter. So after the text and running an inventory, we will find which media and incorporate them into the profile itself. Obviously, the headline. The headline is probably the single most important real estate on your profile, because that's the only meaningful piece that visitors will read without even going to your profile. Whenever someone performs a search, you will see 3 elements, and one of them is your headline. And many entrepreneurs just write CEO at whatever or co-founder at whatever, and they're not thinking about their prospect. Because as prospects, we're not interested in knowing that you run a business. We want to know what's in it for us. Again, the technicality is not that important, because unless you really think about your ideal client and the sort of information he's looking for, it will not happen. Because many people just do what we just said and take the job title from their website without making it interesting. Visually, there's a top banner that LinkedIn enables all LinkedIn users to use. And that could be a nice theme banner, either with your logo or an engaging image. You need to tweak the image a bit to make it interesting, but it's very powerful when you come to someone's profile and the top banner is interesting and not just the blue solar system that we see. It shows a lack of imagination in a way. And if I can add like 1 or 2 other points, a simple call to action is missing in many profiles. So the next step would really think about a simple question: who you're targeting, what sort of information they're looking for, and what would you like your ideal prospect to do after they reach your profile. And it's very simple, but if you take the same entrepreneurs and you go to their profiles, not all of them actually specify that call to action. Would you like them to go to marcguberti.com? Would you like them to watch the summit? Would you like them to sign up to something else? Why is that information missing from the profile if that's the single most important thing you'd like to do? Keywords, because LinkedIn is, the last time LinkedIn published figures, there were close to 12 billion searches on the site in a year. So a lot of people log into LinkedIn and run searches, and keywords and the way your prospect would phrase the keywords is also a nice way to get found. And the last point would be to add visible contact details. As you know, whenever you visit someone's profile, unless you're connected to him or to her, you will not see his or her contact details. You can send him a connection request, but that enables him to accept or decline. You can also pay and use an email to message that person, but the easiest thing to do would really be to add visible contact details you'd like your prospect to use, be it an email or something else.
Daniel, thank you for giving us all these great insights for how we can polish our LinkedIn profiles. A lot of deep stuff in there. So I feel like this is going to be something that we're going to be looking at again and again if we want to continue to build our LinkedIn. But one thing you were talking about earlier was for the entrepreneur, if that person wants to get more leads on LinkedIn, you said there needs to be a shift in mindset. Yes. So can you go a little deeper on how we can use LinkedIn to generate leads?
Sure, thanks. Let's separate it into 3 steps. The first is knowing what we have currently. The second stage would be to understand what we want, and then we'll talk about the various tools. So the existing situation is our marketing system. How do we get our sales? Do we sign up people for a newsletter? Do we visit them? Is a trade show involved? Do we have an inside sales associate or team or virtual assistant doing something? Is there anything else we could leverage outside of LinkedIn? And the second question about the existing situation would be the content. Okay, in the CMS, it's natural to think about the content, and naturally the content that you have produced outside of LinkedIn. So reviewing the sort of content that you have already produced is fundamental to see the way you want to leverage LinkedIn, because a lot of that content is great and is missing from your LinkedIn platform or your LinkedIn presence, be it a company page or the profile or groups or articles, some of which we may go into later. The second stage will be to decide what we want. Do we expect a major event like a summit in 3 months' time? Do we have any other way we'd like to conduct business, such as requesting warm introductions from our connections? In other words, if I see that you're connected to someone who looks like an interesting prospect for me, would I reach out to you and ask you whether you felt comfortable introducing me to that person? And based on your answer, it would require either a connection strategy that would be open or a connection strategy that would be more limited. And the tools, the LinkedIn tools, could be a number of things. Who's viewed your profile? I think you'll agree is a great way to see people who are interested in you. Okay, they may have bumped into your profile thanks to a number of different triggers, but it doesn't matter. Some of the people visiting your profile could be excellent leads. Many people see the names and they're excited and they basically wait for the other side to reach out, which doesn't always happen. So you could decide that you identify the interesting leads of people who visited your profile and you reach out to them, either through a connection request or a message. And the more active you are on LinkedIn, the more people will view your profile. And even visiting other people's profile, like your ideal client's profile, if you have the right setting, the privacy setting means some of them will visit you wondering who you are. That could lead to something done outside of LinkedIn. A Skype call, a phone call, a meeting, a demo, whatever you'd like to get them to the next stage. Other than who's viewed your profile, we could go into groups. Groups are a huge topic and it's changing, but still you could use groups' existing content that you feel is interesting for your prospects and your audience. Looking at your own connections is also something that a lot of entrepreneurs can do. If you look at your connections, some of them could be meaningful prospects for your business and they don't always know what you're doing now, the things you're working on now and what you're up to now. And that could be leveraged, for example, either through messaging, again, outside of LinkedIn if it's important, or through status updates, or through articles. So we'll start with analyzing the existing situation. If you have a system in place, then in some cases, all you need is the name. If you have a system that once you have the name of the decision maker, there's a system for you to reach out to that person, then all you need is the name. And you don't have to send a connection request. You don't have to do, not everything has to be done on LinkedIn. LinkedIn could be a great database. It doesn't mean that the transaction has to take place on the LinkedIn platform itself.
Dan, thank you for providing those great insights, especially with the fact that not all of it has to happen on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn can just be a starting point to a healthy relationship. Before we get into building relationships on LinkedIn, I want to touch upon getting more exposure for our content. So I know this will be a little similar to getting leads, a little more different. So can you share with us how that part of it works?
Sure. What I would suggest is ask what sort of content are we looking at? Okay, we can broadly classify the sort of content we have. If we think about evergreen content that will be relevant for our audience in 6 months' time and in 12 months' time, then that content could be part of our own individual LinkedIn profile. The good content that is less evergreen is probably best shared in various groups. It will require some research of the groups, and you have to join the groups before you're able to post or share on the groups. But there are millions of very powerful groups on LinkedIn, and a lot of the good content you have could be shared across a number of groups. You should be aware of, if you have like 10 pieces of good content, like 10 videos or 10 podcasts, instead of carpet bombing and going to 10 groups and sharing the same links over and over again, it would be wiser to join 100 groups and maybe, within the next 2 months, only share 2 links, like one every 4-6 weeks, so people are not annoyed by you sharing content, but it will actually reach more people than if you just focused on 1 or 2 groups and share the same content there. Lastly, if we talk about evergreen content and long-term or good content, sometimes we have a call to action that is really time sensitive. A summit, a webinar, something that it takes place in the next couple of days or next couple of weeks. And probably the best way to leverage that is through status updates. Going to your homepage and then sharing the link, and that would be seen by some of your connections. So 3 areas I would look into are your profile, then groups, and updates or status updates. Articles could combine both the evergreen content and the long-term content from my perspective.
Dan, thank you for providing those great insights. I especially like the LinkedIn groups where I feel like when people find that big LinkedIn group and they see the potential for that group, and obviously this isn't just LinkedIn, but they see the potential in that group. They're like, ooh, if I just keep email, it's basically sharing and sharing and sharing and sharing my content, it's going to be more traffic. But if you find like 99 groups, just like that one group, you can very easily promote yourself over and over again without being annoying because you just spread out the content. So I really love that dynamic of using LinkedIn to promote content.
While we're at it, I'd like to throw in another stat, and that if you're tooting your own horn and only sharing your own content, then most people don't like it that much. So for every piece of content promoting your own business, I would suggest sharing 4 industry news or other news that is relevant for your audience, but is not your own promotion. Because the minute we know that the person is only promoting his website or his event or his product, then we become blind. And if we find interesting content through that person, then the 3rd or the 4th time, the first time he would share something about his product, then we would be more willing and more interested to check it out rather than knowing that it's the same promotion is running for years. So the proportion is also important.
I do like that strategy as well because, having that good balance in place basically creates a higher level of trustworthiness. And speaking of being trustworthy, trust is a very important part of any relationship that you build on LinkedIn. And some relationships obviously can open the doors to new opportunities. Like if we both knew like Bill Gates, for instance, that's going to open the door to many opportunities we probably can't even think of. So, even if you can't connect with Bill Gates, like you can still connect with a lot of great people in your niche. So how do you strategically use LinkedIn to build relationships?
That's a great question that many LinkedIn members have never asked themselves. So I'd like to take the opportunity to actually ask the CMSS Summiteers to think about the question you just asked. A lot of people basically react. So they get all sorts of invitations and they decide whether they want to accept or not. But I would advise them to think about the sort of use they would like to use LinkedIn for. Are they comfortable with having a large network and not knowing everyone in that network? Would they prefer knowing people they connect to? A lot of people have clear answers to that question, but when they log in, they make the wrong sort of decision because they don't want to hurt people who have invited them, or they don't want to be accountable for their decision, and that would influence both their feed. Their feed would be more or less interesting if it's based on people they know or not. So let's remember that your LinkedIn connection strategy is also dependent on your offline networking strategy. What's most comfortable to you? Are you an open networker in real life? Then probably reflecting that or duplicating that on LinkedIn is best. Would you rather have warm introductions and use or ask a number of people that know you really well for meaningful introductions? If that's the case, then you don't have to accept everyone. You don't have to become a LinkedIn open networker or a liar. So the sheer fact that people think about the question and then decide would make it a lot more powerful for them going on. The next two stages would be to think about their current situation. Do we have an entrepreneur? Are we looking at an entrepreneur who's just signing up to LinkedIn? Or are we looking at someone that has opened a LinkedIn account, 6 years ago and has 3,000 connections? Would he or she feel comfortable with that size of the connections, size of network or not? So the second layer would be to understand whether the person is just starting out on LinkedIn or has an existing network. And the last question would be looking ahead. What sort of use will we want to have on LinkedIn? Are we interested in exposure? That could mean having a larger network or many connections will help us. Are we looking for warm introductions? In that case, we are not necessarily interested in many connections. We want them to be meaningful. When someone looks you up on LinkedIn and sees that you are a second level degree, so that means at least one person is a shared connection. What happens when your prospect reaches out to that shared connection and asks about Marc Guberti? What happens? Would that person say that he's listened to your podcast and read your June report and agrees with you on a number of issues, or would he say Guberti who? So if you think about the answer to that question, you will also be able to understand if it's right for you to connect with people you don't know. If you cannot handle or manage well 300 connections, then you will not be able to manage 3,000 connections. It comes with a lot of benefits, but it also has some responsibility or price. You will have to spend more time seeing through the clutter and finding interesting information. Not everyone agrees to do that. So the single most important decision is to decide whether you're an open networker and you will feel comfortable having lots of connections, even if you don't know them all, or you prefer to connect to people you know well. And as long as you don't change strategy, it's fine. If you're happy being an open networker and you will remain an open networker for the years to come, you'll see lots of advantages through LinkedIn. If on the other hand, you prefer connecting only with people you know well, and you stay the same in the next couple of years, then you will see huge benefits from LinkedIn. Just don't jump.
Dan, thank you for providing all those great insights. I especially love how you say how to connection is really important. I feel like too many people, they're seeing the message connect and then they hit the button connect, almost like a Twitter follower now. I mean, you could build connections on Twitter in like the same way, but we more generally associate that with LinkedIn because LinkedIn is, you have the ability to use messages and email in such a powerful way to communicate with people, but definitely don't just think of it as hitting that connect button. Engage with them instead. And since we're on this topic, Dan, I was wondering, what is your approach to engaging with people who either recently connected with you or you recently connected with them?
Okay. It's a great question. And I like connecting with people I know well. And one of the benefits of that is that connecting with someone is, for me, the end of a process. So I've already worked with that person. I've already met the person in 90% of the cases. So I don't feel I need to do something immediately after connecting with that person other than just sending a message and thanking him if he or she sent me the invitation request. However, it touched on a very important issue, and that's maintenance in the long term. Because if we had a business connection 3 years ago, and we haven't nurtured that, and we haven't been in touch, then it means that as time goes by, both of us will feel less inclined to reach out and ask how you've been and what you're up to. So what I'm trying to do when I read content that I feel is interesting is to ask one very simple question: who do I know that could use that information well? So I'm not looking for tips about something. I'm just reading lots of stuff. And when I see something that could interest you or someone else, I would use that link, reach out to that person, send a link, ask him how he's been, add something personal because I don't want it's an opportunity to strengthen our relationship. And a lot of business comes through weak ties, people you've worked with years ago. And the minute they remember you, then they will reach out and either recommend you to someone or refer you to someone or send someone your way. So the maintenance is very important, and it's probably one of the most difficult things for people to do, because many people try to think about LinkedIn as an operation. Okay, let's do this. And the right approach would be to think about LinkedIn as a process. In other words, use it not extensively, but all the time. Because if we can take the next 5 to 10 hours people may use on LinkedIn and distribute it over 6 months, the impact of those 6 months will be a lot stronger than having like one day or one weekend trying to bombard everyone asking for referrals or asking for help or things like that. So maintenance is key, and it's not easy for a lot of people to do.
Dan, thank you for sharing your insights on how you would build these long-term relationships. And it's interesting you mentioned LinkedIn as the end point, where you've known the person for a while, you're connecting with them on LinkedIn just to build the relationship you already had even further. And I would like to transition back into the content marketing piece of this puzzle. So LinkedIn publishing in particular, you could publish your content on LinkedIn, even copy paste your blog post in there so they get seen by more people. So where, in your opinion, does LinkedIn publishing fit in with getting our content out to more people?
Okay, so I'll say this. LinkedIn articles and LinkedIn posts are excellent on one condition, that you promote them. Okay, if we go back a year to early 2017, then just publishing an article meant most of your connections would see it, would be notified about it. And I'm sorry to say that if you publish an article today, in the summer of 2017, most of your connections will not even see it, and they can't customize the system to see it. So publishing the article is excellent, but you will have very few views unless you think ahead of the ways to promote the link. So we can think about a number of ways. The groups would be probably the strategic tool, identifying dozens of groups that could be interested in that sort of article, that sort of content, joining them ahead of time, and then sharing moderately your content across those groups. And you can also think about your tribe, reaching out to people who appreciate the content, tag people when you publish the post. And if your article is a case study of 2 or 3 podcasters or authors, then you can mention them on LinkedIn and basically ask them to share your article because they're featured there or because they're happy with the content itself. Your profile could also become a place to use some of these articles because people will see it up front. And the question to ask is, how much content do you have outside of LinkedIn, which you could repurpose as LinkedIn articles? Think of it as maybe 3, 5, or 10 different articles. And if you had, say, if you wanted to cover the area of productivity and have 5 articles, then the first would be a general overview, and the second would be maybe a drill down about something specific. But you would link back to the first article and also mention the third and the fourth and the fifth. And you can think about those articles as standalone articles. In other words, maybe someone will only read the fourth article for the first time, and then you want to enable him to see the other articles you published. Whenever you hit publish, you get a link. And that link could be used in Twitter and in other social media. So you're a Twitter king for me. Okay, so it doesn't have to happen on LinkedIn. There's life outside of LinkedIn.
Dan, thank you for the great advice on how LinkedIn publishing fits in with this whole process. And with this whole process, there are a lot of moving parts with the LinkedIn groups connecting, taking the engagement and relationships outside of LinkedIn. But with all these features LinkedIn offers, there are some that I feel like fall through the cracks, as is true for any tool. So what do you see as the most underutilized feature on LinkedIn?
So let me maybe mention 3 or 4 and see what is your opinion about those. One of them is the ability to create a search alert, what used to be called a safe search. Is that something you think many people know? Is that something you use?
I don't use it right now.
Okay, so the basic idea is to think about your ideal prospect, okay, the person that the sort of audience you're mostly interested in. Say we are interested in CIOs of mid-sized companies in New England. And when we run a search and find 200 or 300 of those executives, LinkedIn enables you to save the search. And in other words, next week, without you doing anything, LinkedIn will run the same search. And if this week we had 205, then maybe next week or in 2 weeks' time, we'll have 210. And once that happens, LinkedIn will message you and say, Mark, here are the 5 new ones. Okay? So you will get a flow of interesting prospects. And I'm thinking about 200 or 300 because if you have a search that has 5,000, then 5,000, you will not be able to actually visit those profiles. And on the other hand, if your search is too limited and you only find 40, then the next time LinkedIn will uncover the 40 first may take a lot of time. So the sweet spot is probably in the low hundreds, 200 to 500, and that's one. The second thing I would mention is the ability to send a message through groups. Whenever you want to send a message to someone you're not connected with, you can either pay or send him a connection request. But there is still hidden somewhere in the group functionality the ability to send 10, sometimes 15 messages a month. So that could be very nice. And a lot of LinkedIn members are not aware of that and are not doing that. The third point I would mention is just adding visible contact details. Whenever I run a workshop, and I've done lectures for probably 9 years now, I ask who's most interested in leads, and I look up that person's profile, and then we ask, okay, what would you like us to do? And the answer is very simple. Well, reach out to me and email me or call me, and then we look at the screen and we ask, okay, what is the person to do? That's the computer, that's the mouse, and there's no visible contact detail there. So a lot of podcasters and authors and entrepreneurs are leaving money on the table because they have not made it easy enough for their audience to reach out to them. So here are the 3 things we can look at: safe searches, the ability to message via groups, and adding contact details, if that's okay.
Those are some really great underutilized features of LinkedIn. I've seen some of those in play. Definitely the part where you get to email your group a certain number of times. And I mean, those are powerful because if you get a lot of people in your group, then that's like basically a free email list in a sense. So that is definitely a very powerful feature of LinkedIn. And since we just talked about the underutilized features and we know that this takes up so much time, I mean, you talked about how all the process of building the relationships. Are there any ways that we can automate some of the parts? I know that you'll never be able to automate the whole thing because, I mean, building a relationship, I can't like hire a robot to do this interview or anything like that. You can't do that either. So like what are methods that like can help us automate some of the parts of this process?
Some tools we can look at are helping us see LinkedIn information outside of LinkedIn. One very nice tool called Rapportive, that's Rapportive. And that basically, if you use Gmail, that shows you the LinkedIn account and other social media accounts of the person you're emailing or the person that has emailed you. So that's one very neat way if you have a lot of, if your memory is visual, then you would see the profile photo, you will see the link, you will see whether you're connected to that person or not. I use a number of other tools. One of them is Connectifier social links, which enables you to see other social media accounts linked to that email. Instead of looking up the person on Twitter or Pinterest or whatever, you would simply see the logo there, and you would be able to visit that person's other social media tools. Quickly, we can think about also something called DuxSoup, DUX-SOUP. LinkedIn used to have a feature enabling you to add some information when you visited someone's profile. It's the LinkedIn tags. May they rest in peace. So you need to use another tool now to do the same. And another thing to take into account if you want to really become active in groups is a widget enabling to share some link into various groups. Instead of going manually through each group and changing the subject line and changing the description and adding the link, you could do it across a number of groups, as long as you ask yourself, really, is that content relevant for this group? And lastly, I will mention, because many people are interested in seeing who's visited their own profile, there are a number of tools out there. Visiting other people's profiles, so you would define the sort of people you would be interested in. And I used one called Search Quant, and that has been pretty powerful because a lot of people then checked me out. And the last thing to do would be to export your connections every now and then, because something could happen to your LinkedIn account. You could be hacked. You could use your password. And if LinkedIn is a meaningful part of your business, then you have the ability to request an archive and do it at least every 6 months. So if something happens, you'll at least have the full names and emails of everyone you've been connected to. Still, automation has its limitation, as you know.
Dan, thank you for sharing all those great insights on basically automating some of the parts and getting information, like valuable information, more readily. So I'd like to shift again back into the content marketing piece of this. So LinkedIn is a great place to promote your content. Obviously, we talked a lot about LinkedIn Publisher and how that creates potential because if you share it on social media, it results in more traffic. And you also have the ability to republish your blog posts through the LinkedIn Publisher. So I'm wondering, how specifically do you use LinkedIn to promote individual blog posts? So not just like the LinkedIn Publisher, but like a blog post on your site.
Okay, so we can look at maybe 4 different angles. One obviously would be to select the proper groups to share that blog content and thinking who could be interested, who is this content helping, out of the groups you've already joined. Or if you do it ahead of time, then identify the sort of groups where members would be the most interested in what you will write about or publish in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time. Then you could also reach out to a number of your fans and ask them either to reshare your status update, announcing the blog post or sharing that blog post, and tagging or mentioning people within that post. People you don't want to exaggerate with that, but if it's truly people who are either mentioned who would find that content relevant, then they would be notified. And another thing you can look at is your team. A lot of entrepreneurs are working with a small team, and they have a different network. They have a different connection strategy. They would be members of other groups. So you don't have to do it yourself. You could have either a joint venture with other people cross-promoting content, or ask people who care about your content to share it not through your own network, but through their identity and sometimes profile or LinkedIn page.
And thank you for sharing with us how we can promote individual blog posts, because I feel like this is a part of LinkedIn that a lot of people overlook, because I feel like social networks like Facebook and Twitter in particular, people think about the blog post promotion angle more on those, but I'm really happy you're able to share some ideas of how to promote your content on LinkedIn. And speaking of sharing some ideas for LinkedIn, you've done a great job of sharing all of your great insights throughout this whole session. And I'm wondering if you could just quickly give us some action steps that we can use, the really important ones for using LinkedIn to expand our content empires.
Wow. Okay. I would suggest first to have the right, to reach a simple decision, and that means that entrepreneurs need to decide they want to leverage LinkedIn to promote their business. It sounds like a no-brainer, but many entrepreneurs and many bloggers have not reached that decision. They're still thinking about it. And the minute they decide that they want to use LinkedIn to leverage their own business, then everything changes. You need to think, if you know your audience, then what do we want them to achieve? We want them to be able to find you. So you have to put the right keywords in there. You have to connect with the right people so your prospect will bump into your profile. Then you have to make it interesting. You have to make it visually interesting. You have to use a headline that caters to their needs and not your position in the company. And then if they ask people about you, like shared connections, you would want those people to know or to be able to help you and share information about you and say how knowledgeable you are about the sort of business you're running. And lastly, you would want those prospect to be able to reach out to you, to contact you, or to go to to sign up for your newsletter or to do something else. But in many cases, it's actually missing from people's profiles. So you have to think about the funnel just like we do in regular marketing, and build our LinkedIn presence top down, thinking about our prospect and the way they think when they visit our profile. We haven't mentioned it, but the single most important resource people have to use is not money on LinkedIn, it's time. Okay, we haven't gone into premium on LinkedIn, but you can gain a lot of advantages from LinkedIn if you invest enough time to know how things work and to look under the hood. And if you're only paying for a premium account and your profile sucks, then you haven't used the tool well. So I would say that the profile is often more important than the company page for SMBs and entrepreneurs. Quality is more important than quantity. You need to think about your LinkedIn profile as a website as opposed to a CV. or resume. You have to think about content and not advertising. And you have to invest time and not money.
Dan, thank you for all these great insights. It was such a pleasure to have you on CMSS. Before you go, as per tradition, I let all the speakers recommend one resource that they want all CMSS attendees to know about.
Thanks a lot. It's been a really great session from my perspective. I've put a 30-day LinkedIn challenge for authors. I published a book at one time, and I think that's what caused me to reach out to you a couple of years ago, because I noticed you did something then on LinkedIn that was unusual. You reordered the sections of your profile, and at the time it was possible. So I thought that authors could leverage LinkedIn better, and anyone going to danielalfon.com, that's DanielAlfon.com, would see a link to the resource and some information about it.
Daniel, thank you for taking the time to share your insights with us. It's been such a pleasure to have you on CMSS.
My pleasure, Mark. Good luck.
Thank you.